Okay. I have preached the book of Hebrews many times. And so each time my sermons come out a little bit different based on who I'm preaching to or where I'm at in my own life at those times. So today, as we look through Hebrews and I point out to you sermon ideas, my goal for that is for you to be able to expound or create your own sermon ideas, um, maybe seeing what I've done or why I've done it. Um, I do believe that anytime you take a text and you're going to preach it, that you should sit with that text and really let it digest and mull over, meditate. That's the right word, right? That's the biblical word. Meditate on that text and, pay attention to the lesson that is going to be preached or taught from that text. Um, and I don't think the text or the nature of the message changes, but maybe how it takes effect in our lives might change based on who we are, where we're at, and the way you present the text will also change. Like I noticed some things today when I was looking at my sermon ideas that are probably not going to translate culturally to uh, your situation. Um, I've got some just phrases and ideas that I use as a delivery method that um, they don't change the message of the text at all. It's just because of our culture and things that we are aware of, we can deliver the text along those lines, um, in a way that is meaningful. So, and I'll point that out when we get there today. There's a few of those in my outlines. Also, today is a holiday in my country. It's a pretty big holiday. It's known as Thanksgiving. Today is our Thanksgiving. Um, that sounds like a very biblical holiday, doesn't it? It really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the Bible. It didn't come from that, but I think Christians uh, in general really can appreciate the concept of having a day that is about Thanksgiving. Um, I love the day for that aspect. I will tell you that we have a sin problem on this day, and that is we usually prepare a gigantic feast. And I think people associate Thanksgiving with overeating, um, which the Bible calls gluttony. And that is a serious problem for us. But I've been trying the last few years to enjoy the feast without becoming gluttonous, without stuffing myself um, so full that it's just overindulgence. So some of the things that I used to do on Thanksgiving were I would fast all day so that I could eat as much as I wanted to at the feast. And I don't do that anymore. I get up and I have my coffee and my breakfast the way that I always do every day. And now I have lunch as well so that I don't eat too much at the feast. Um, my father had a habit of on Thanksgiving, we always went outside to do something outdoors. Sometimes it would be a building project. We'd do some construction together, or sometimes it would be shooting our bow and arrow or our guns. Sometimes it would be, cleaning up something that was, needed to be done outside, but it's usually something outside. And then we would come in for the feast and lay around and watch football, American football, not real football, but we would watch that. So that's kind of my history and practice of Thanksgiving today. That being said, if I end a little bit early on class, I hope that you won't be offended, especially those of you who've traveled to the school for your class tonight. I don't want to offend you by ending early, but if we end early and I can go to my sister's home, that's my plan. So I hope that won't be too offensive. Hello, Sister Judith. I was just explaining about today is a holiday in our country. It's the day of Thanksgiving, and I'm just explaining what I do and how we celebrate that day. Okay. Well, are we ready to start looking at sermon and lesson ideas from Hebrews? I want to go all the way back to chapter 1. Um, Now, I should probably pull up my note page so you can see notes again, and also uh, the Bible text. So let me get those two things ready for you. I had them ready, and now I've lost one of them at least. Let's see. Give me just a moment here. Okay, I've got my Bible. I should probably share my screen. How's that? Share screen. All right. So you see my Bible. I'm going to make it bigger so we can see it. Let's see. View, zoom. That's about the right size, right?
It looks great, brother.
Okay, good. So we'll use this. Um, and let me pull my note page up so we can write some notes on the board. That's pretty small. Let me make those bigger. That's better. There we go. That'll work. Okay. Sermon and lesson ideas. All right. So here we go. Jumping into chapter 1. Oh, Hebrews chapter Hebrews chapter 1. All right. Again, I think you probably noticed because I spent half a class on it. The this opening text of Hebrews is one of my favorite texts in all of the Bible. And so obviously from chapter 1, I definitely have a sermon from this. I do teach this more in personal Bible studies though. However, it is a really good powerful lesson. So here we go. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and uh, he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than others. So, chapter one, my sermon, and some of these are nautical themed. I don't know if you understand that word, nautical. It's having to do with navigating on the water. So some of these are nautical themed, and I don't know how that got in my head, but many years ago, my sermons from Hebrews, a lot of them uh, are nautical themed. So you'll kind of see that as we go through. But this one is choose your captain, and that's my main sermon idea from chapter one is um, choose your captain. Uh, I want people to think about, hey, there's a lot of different places we can get information from. Uh, there's a lot of different things in the Bible, even that we can get our information from. He mentions here many times, many ways, and the prophets. So, all those things are even in the Bible, and that can be confusing to people, right? They're like, well, God said this in a dream to so and so, so why wouldn't God say this in a dream to me? Um, but when you have a captain, when you've got the Son of God and he's already here and speaking, why would you want to trade that for something else? So, this choose your captain idea is powerful to me because not only does he tell us to listen to this son, then in verses 3 through 4, he describes the son, Jesus Christ, and how great he is. I wish that highlight would go away. There we go. He is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint. So all these amazing descriptions of this captain. Like, why would you want to choose a different captain that's not this one? He's the exact imprint of the nature of God. He is the radiance of the glory of God. He makes purification for sins. He's at the right hand of the majesty on high. So his name is inherited and more excellent. All these reasons, like, why would you want to choose any other captain? And that applies not just spiritually into who you listen to spiritually, but also in our life. Some people, I remember in Brazil, we had the patron culture, which was basically um, the patron comes from the Latin word father for father, and the idea is you have somebody who's richer and wealthier than you that takes care of you. Um, and I think this is a tendency in some cultures to try to find that person who you're dedicated to them because you know they're going to take care of you. And a lot of time that comes from our employers. Um, and so we need to be careful that we're not choosing a person to be our captain. I have to tell boyfriends and girlfriends, like young people who are dating, and I don't know what your dating culture is like in Africa. Uh, but here in the United States, our young people date on their own without a lot of parental involvement. And so I have to tell people don't let your boyfriend or your girlfriend be the captain of your life, right? Like they're not your purpose. They're not your reason for existing, and they don't direct your life. And you can't let them be that way. Some people let school be their captain, like education or their professors. Some people let their church leaders be their captain. And in some ways, I get that. They're like first mates on the ship. But we have to be careful that we don't elevate them up to the captain level because Jesus, uh, our Savior, is our true captain. So choose your captain. And you can use all of chapter one for that because there's just so much in chapter one. He's worshipped by the angels. He has a throne that is forever and ever. He loves righteousness. He hates wickedness. He laid the foundations of the earth. Um, he is the same, and his years have no end, and his enemies are made a footstool. So all of that is from chapter one. So choose your captain is my sermon idea there. And I'm going to silence my phone. All right. The next one, and this is a sermon that I have preached many times, and that comes from chapter two, and it's called Anchor Down. Um, this is specifically from verses let's see, 1 through 4. Okay. And again, here's a cultural phrase that I'll explain in a minute, but let's read Hebrews 2 1 through 4. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard, while God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles and by gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. So, this concept, and I mentioned this in a previous class, of drifting, that's a nautical term that describes a boat or a log that is moving at the current, moving with the current undirected in like a river or the ocean. And so the answer to this is to drop your anchor down, right? To make sure that you are staying where you want to stay. Now, in Tennessee, we have a university sports team, and their mascot is the Commodores. The Commodores are, a Commodore is someone who is in command of a ship, right? And so when we go to these sporting events at this local university, one of the things we always shout out to the team is to anchor down. And they'll come over the loudspeaker and say, anchor down. And that is like, um, draw your line in the sand. Like, I'm not going to move from right here. We're going to be strong right here, anchor down. And so I tell people locally when I preach this sermon, hey, we're going to anchor down, which means we're not going to let anything move us away from where we want to be. Um, we're going to be super strong. And we talk about the opposite of anchoring down is neglecting, and then that causes drift, right? And you can talk about how great of a salvation that we have. So you don't want to neglect the salvation. This is a um, powerful sermon. Um, so that's the next sermon is Anchor Down. I was thinking there was something else I was going to tell you on this, though. So give me a minute. I feel like I lost my train of thought on it. Sweet drift away. Tested to us by those who heard. I guess just the importance of the salvation. You can use this text a lot for if you're wanting people to become saved, or I think it was originally written to people so that they don't lose their salvation. But I think it can be spoken to people who are distracted by things in their world, right? You can be distracted by illness. You can be distracted by riches, wealth, family. You can be distracted by love interests. You can be distracted by sports. You can be distracted by your profession, your job. Um, can be distracted by safety and security. That's a big one that the United States Christians are really struggling with right now. Is they're bowing down to the God of safety and security, and um, that's worldly wisdom. It's not heavenly wisdom, right? So something to be aware of. All right. Let's see. I've got another one here in chapter 2 that comes from that verse we studied, verse 17, chapter 2, verses 14 through the end of the chapter, which I believe is 18. And that is greater expectations. So that sermon title is again, for me, it's a cultural. There is a famous author we have in English named Charles Dickens. He wrote a book called Great Expectations. So when I use this phrase, greater expectations, people in their minds are going to think about, oh, yeah, that phrase, great expectations. But greater indicates that we're going beyond just great. We're going to go to greater. My point of this sermon is that humans think that we sin because we're human. And so our expectations of ourselves are pretty low. Like they're pretty low on the standard of holiness. Um, a lot of people just be like, oh, yeah, well, I can't help it. I'm just human, or I'm just a man. And those excuses are no longer valid because of what the text teaches us about Jesus, that he verse 14, um let me go down there on the Bible app here. Okay. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, what is that? They're man, they're human, right? He himself likewise partook of the same things. So Jesus was also flesh and blood. Um, and verse 17, he had to be made like his brothers in every respect or in all ways. So he was just like us in every way. So we cannot use the excuse that we're just human. So the idea with greater expectations is that we should have greater expectations of ourselves as humankind. We can't just roll over and be like, well, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Now, that's not true. Jesus was perfect. Okay. And it wasn't because he had some kind of special power. He just did it, and we don't. So that's a strong sermon that I like to preach, is that we should have greater expectations of ourselves, and we should be careful not to be like, oh, well, you're just human. It's okay. You messed up. Poor you. That's a that's a Calvinistic way of teaching. Um, Calvinism being the theology that you don't have any control over yourself or anything else, that he's going to do what he wants to do as God, as sovereign God. And is God sovereign? Yes. Is God going to do what he wants to do? Yes. But he also has given us uh, some skin in the game, is a phrase we use. He's given us a choice in the matter. And so that choice comes down to the choices we make, just like Jesus chose the right things. So that's the first three. You want me to keep going?
Yes, yes, please.
All right. Next sermon comes from chapter 3, and it's going to be verses 1 through 6. And this one is called In My Father's House. Um, You remember this text? I think we talked about it earlier this week that Moses is a servant in the house and Jesus is the son over the house. Um, but what we didn't get to is the application part, and that is in verse 6, we are his house also. Okay. We are his house. So, yeah, Moses is the house. Great. We're with Moses in the house. We are in the house as well, and the Son is over us. Um, and then you can, as you're teaching and preaching this, you've got this phrase, what makes us in the house? Well, he says, if we hold fast, sorry, I keep forgetting to read the text with you. See this verse 6, chapter 3, verse 6. But Christ is faithful over God's house as a son, and we are his house. And then here's your teaching points. If we hold fast our confidence and our boasting in our hope. Um, I don't think we think about that very often, boasting in our hope. I don't think we think about, hey, Christians need to be boasting in their hope. Well, what does that even mean, boasting in our hope? Christians need to be 100% totally convinced that they're going to be with God and that they're going to live forever. That's something that if people want to think we're weird about that, that's fine. That's okay. But that's what we're holding out for. That's what we're giving up our lives in this world for. That's what we're denying ourselves for, is to have this confidence and boasting in our hope. Hope, I've got a note on hope later on in chapter 11 because let me pull that up here. Chapter 11 starts off talking about faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Okay, so sometimes I'll preach that text, but let me just write here because this talks about our confidence and boasting our hope. Let me give you some notes on that. Hope is grounded in discomfort. No one uh, who is satisfied has hope. Faith launches me to look for God because I don't have all of Him yet. Okay. So hope is grounded in discomfort. Hope uh, doesn't exist unless there's something missing here that we have, right? Does that make sense? So no one who is satisfied has hope. If you're satisfied, that don't take that to mean content. It just means satisfied. Um, I personally think this is a really strong message for those of us who are very wealthy, which most of the people in my country are. And we get stressed out about keeping up with our barns and our belongings and our possessions. And wow, it's really, uh, you know, but any hope that they have sometimes is for more stuff. But spiritual hope is saying, I'm not complete until we have those promises from God. So faith, and that comes back in for chapter 11, launches me to look for God because I don't have all of Him yet. And we're going to see that as we look at what those people say in chapter 11. Um, Another thing to mention here about hope, let me pull this up, is you're probably thinking of it too. First Corinthians chapter 13, verse 13. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. See, why is love greater than hope? Because love will exist in heaven, but we don't need hope after we've already gotten there. And faith is going to be not necessary anymore because we will have already completed that too. So faith and hope are both kind of expecting something in the future. Um, but love is going to remain even when faith is completed and hope is fulfilled. Does that make sense? So, um, it's interesting if you think about what's going to characterize our actions in heaven. It's not going to be faith. It's not going to be hope. It's going to be love. But they all three characterize our actions on earth: faith, hope, and love. Can you imagine being in a place where everything is done out of agape love? It's kind of neat. Okay, back to sermon ideas. Let's see. Chapter 3. Let's go back to chapter 3. Okay, now as we look at this phrase, uh, this warning that we see in chapter 3, that we originally saw it came from Psalm 95, and it is hammered pretty hard as we get to these verses. Chapter 3 sermon. And the first one is called Heart Attack. Um, the idea here is that the hardening of your heart is the danger of this warning. Remember this apostasy warning? And he says, when he quotes Psalm 95, do not harden your hearts as in the day of rebellion. Remember, I think I mentioned in the introduction material that the word cardia is an important word in the book of Hebrews. It's the word heart. Um, and so we've got to guard our heart because if we don't, we'll not enter into his rest. So look at verse 12. Lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart that leads you to fall away from the living God. Now that's interesting, right? Because you would think if you had an unbelieving heart, you wouldn't even come to God to start with. But I think what he's saying is you've already come to God. Now your heart is becoming unbelieving. So we have a danger that our hearts can become hard even after coming to Christ. Look at verse 13, that you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So why did I call it the heart attack? Well, if you think about someone who has heart failure, where their heart uh, has a blockage a lot of times, well, what's happened is those arteries in your body have hardened due to salt and cholesterol and other conditions that fats, and it makes those arteries around and going in and out of your heart makes them hard. And when there's no flexibility in there and then something clogs, that's when we have a heart attack. And we can die from that, right? Because our heart arteries got hardened and there was no room left for them to work. Spiritually, this can happen as well. We can have a heart attack because we got hardened in our hearts. And sin does that. I've got another sermon idea I'm going to mention in a minute on that. But let's keep looking at this. He mentions heart again in verse 15 as he quotes Psalm 95 again. And then he mentions verse 19, see that we see that they were unable to enter because of unbelief, right? Um, and then in verse 3 of chapter 4, for we who have believed enter that rest. That's those whose heart is still healthy. Let's see. Today, if you hear his voice, again, this is in chapter 4, verse 7, do not harden your heart. Says it again, also from Psalm 95. Um, how do you harden your heart? Well, verse 11 says disobedience is part of that. Um, okay, so that's the heart attack sermon. The other one is right here. This one probably won't translate culturally. Um, trick or treat. And I don't know. Um, we have this little phrase called trick or treat in our culture. It's kind of a kid thing, and it kind of comes from Halloween, which I understand is not a Christian day at all. But the idea is that the kids go around dressed up in costumes and they go to all the houses in the neighborhood. And they have this phrase where they go up, they knock on the door, and they say trick or treat. And the idea is that the people in the house give them a piece of candy or some candy. That's the treat. Um, the the phrase comes from a more mischievous type of action, and that is supposedly back in the old days, the kids would come up and they would say trick or treat, and that is either you give us a treat or we're going to do something to you. Like that's a trick. Like you could throw eggs at their house, or you could, I don't know, play a prank on them or come back. And so by giving the treat, you're keeping the kids from doing a trick on you. That's kind of the history of the phrase. Again, all of this is not Christian. And but what I think is when the devil offers us treats, sometimes he's tricking us. Does that make sense? The trick is a deceit. It's a deception. And so when I look at chapter 3 and specifically um, this phrase right here in verse 13, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Okay. That we don't get confused that when Satan offers us something that looks like a treat, it really is probably a trick. Um, Nothing that Satan does for us is going to be good for us in the long run. And so he's really tricking us all the time. And so if Halloween is the devil's holiday, and if trick or treating is part of that, let me tell you, the devil's going to be best at trick or treating us. So that's kind of where that idea comes.